Hello and welcome to today's panel discussion, How to Navigate and Lead in Clean Energy and Climate Discussions. My name is Susan Monroe and I am with Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy. For today's purpose, we'll shorten that to CICE. I am joined today by three strong leaders in the chamber arena. And when it comes to clean energy, resilience, or climate policy, these are the experts. We have with us Jose Becerro, Senior Manager, Global Energy 2.0 with Greater Houston Partnership. Nick Glover, Vice President of Advocacy with the Tampa Chamber. And we also have with us Ann Silver, President and CEO with Reno plus Sparks Chamber of Commerce. So welcome today, panelists. And I just want to give a quick review that CICE has long promoted the incredible, impressive economic benefits associated with clean energy. But now clean energy and climate are really everyday conversations in the business and policy world. Solar and wind, we all know now, are the cheapest forms of new electric generation. And in the next 5 years or so, it will likely be more expensive, and actually right now, more expensive to operate many existing coal or natural gas power plants than building new solar or wind farms. And finally, after decades of work on the regulatory front, our first major offshore wind farm is ready to get going and has been permitted. We are truly in the midst of an energy transformation. And given the importance of energy to the cost of doing business and really our overall way of life, chambers of commerce need to have a seat at that table. Additionally, approximately 70% of Fortune 100 companies have greenhouse gas reduction targets, with renewable energy being a key component. Even small businesses are seeking to procure more clean energy and run sustainable businesses as a competitive advantage. So the reality is that clean energy is cheap, it is in demand, it can bring billions of dollars of investment to your community and state, and it creates jobs faster than most other industries. There is ever a time to lean in on energy policy, now might just be it. So whether you're fully engaged in clean energy or climate action, just dipping your toe in the waters or watching from the sidelines, we think this conversation will help you find your seat at the table and help ensure your business community has a voice in energy policy development. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists now, starting with Jose and then Ann, and then on to Nick, to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your role in energy and climate discussions at your chamber. And Jose, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate it. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to CICE for organizing. As you mentioned, I'm Jose Becerro. I'm the Senior Director of Global Energy 2.0 at the Greater Houston Partnership. And my role essentially is focused on working with the existing energy industry and major energy companies in the Houston region on transitioning our energy economy to a low carbon energy economy going forward. And we're doing that in a number of different ways. We are working with, as I mentioned, the large energy incumbents, the oil and gas companies, on diversifying their business models, on encouraging them to invest into new clean energy, renewable energy technologies and business opportunities. We also are working with the startup community. We're working very aggressively to build a landing pad for new energy technology startups. We recruited several new startup development organizations that are now operating in Houston and fostering and building new startups, working with entrepreneurs. We're also aggressively trying to bring more energy capital to Houston, specifically venture capital, private equity, project finance resources, so that startups that emerge out of Houston in the energy tech space receive investment locally and have a chance of growing locally going forward. We are also, actively on the economic development side pursuing what we call Energy 2.0 companies. And so this effort is we feel critical to creating new energy jobs in Houston going forward. We strongly believe that jobs and energy will not come from oil and gas going forward. We feel that the industry is sort of in a kind of a mature state, and also that has gone through several iterations of efficiency gains. So essentially, the oil and gas production we see coming out of the Houston and Texas, it will essentially remain flat over the next several decades. But the industry has figured out how to produce the same amount of oil and gas with fewer and fewer people running equipment and facilities. So we know as the lead economic development organization in Houston, we want to continue to be the global energy capital, but we also want to lead the world in energy transition. To do that, we have to create new energy jobs. And so that boils down to our interest and focus on growing a new energy 2.0 economy, which includes renewable energy, energy storage, batteries, electric vehicles, even hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. So that at a very high level is what we're focused on at the Greater Houston Partnership from an economic development standpoint. And I look forward to going into more details.
That's great. We will turn that over to Ann. And Jose, I just want to say, I noticed you said you don't want to lead the nation in the energy transition. You want to lead the world. So let's go. Okay.
That's
Ann.
right.
Well, we're excited to lead Northern Nevada in the transition. And we didn't just stick our toe in the water. We kind of jumped in, dove right into the deep end of the pool. The Reno-Sparks Chamber of Commerce is the largest business organization in Northern Nevada with 2,300 members. And in 2018, I was asked to sit on the City of Reno's Climate and Sustainability Advisory Board, which then met for 15 months to develop a 82-page plan on all the actions that the city itself could take in terms of going green, decreasing carbon emissions, everything we all now think of as clean energy. And it was an amazing experience for me, other than recycling and being very conscientious about my recycling efforts. I knew very little. And so being on that board, I learned a tremendous amount, and we fully embraced that plan. And I'm pleased to say that it was the first unanimous plan ever accepted by our Reno City Council. So we then championed that plan through the next legislative session, and the chamber itself took a very strong stand in its public policy platform on clean renewable energy. And I would say that was our first foray into what has now become almost commonplace language, as you referred to, Susan. And we have been strong proponents of legislative action at the state level, county action, and city level action for both the cities of Reno and Sparks. And we're very proud of that leading role our chamber is playing. It was unexpected, but we are full tilt into that world.
Love it. Full tilt. That's a great descriptive. And we'll talk more, Ann, about what you mentioned briefly about state and legislative action and what that looks like in the clean energy space with chambers. So Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas Glover. I'm Vice President of Advocacy for the Tampa Bay Chamber. We're focused on making sure that the region of Tampa Bay is as competitive as it can possibly be. And so when we say Tampa Bay, we're talking about a tri-county area of Hillsborough County, Pasco County, and Pinellas County. And so my role really is to lead the public policy arena for all of that region on behalf of our business clients and business customers and members. And so again, much like Ann and Jose, we kind of stumbled into this, right? So being a coastal community, it's really hard not to think about the implications of climate change and not to think about resiliency. So it's my duty as VP of Advocacy to lead our legislative agenda crafting every single year. And so we're in the middle of doing that. And so you would expect that climate change, resiliency, sustainability to be a part of that. You may be interested to know we've decided to put that under the guiding principle of business and economic development because we do think it's a business and economic development engine and driver. So for us, we think about it in terms of competitiveness, competing with other markets across the entire country and across the world, and what we can best do to make sure that businesses are thriving here in Tampa Bay. But also, if we do that and we do it well, that will also create interest in businesses relocating to the Tampa Bay region. So leading those initiatives, working with our partners at the city level, the county level, the state level, and across the country has really been a pleasure for us. And look forward to answering any questions that you might have, Susan, and hearing from Ann and Jose as well.
That's great. Well, yeah, we may have a few questions for you, so we look forward to that. Nick, guiding principle, so that clean energy, resilient sustainability space, you see that as an economic driver for your region. So that's super. We will dig in deeper on that one. So now we're going to transition to some Q&As. We do have maybe some specific questions for specific panelists, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So, but I'm going to throw out some questions now. We'll see how many we get to, but please, anyone jump in with the response or remarks. And I think the first one, we talk about how your chamber is currently engaged in clean energy, climate sustainability. I think we've gotten some of that. So we'll move on to the next one. More and more often, we're hearing that chambers and communities feel it's important to lead out on climate action, to lead on resilience and clean energy in order to be competitive with other communities. How do you view your chamber's role in this? Some of you touched on this, but specifically your chamber's role in this, in how you are maybe also working with other stakeholders in your community.
Well, I'll kick it off. So because this is our first foray into this space, one of the wonderful things that the chamber world has is each other. Right, I've got Ann here and Jose who may have done things a little bit differently, or who may have a much more mature program. So when we first started getting into this space, I picked up the phone quite simply, and I called chambers that I knew were doing things really well, or who have encountered some of these opportunities before, and we got really great insight. But I view our role as the perfect fulcrum in this whole thing, right? So we have our members whose interests we represent, but we also work with elected officials, and often they come to us to ask what our members are thinking, what they should be doing to make this potential change more palatable to members. And that's a role we found ourselves in very often over the last year plus, where elected officials want to push for really strong, really quick change. Members get brought to the table. And then it's our job to make sure that elected officials are hearing directly from those stakeholders who are impacted from a variety of industries, whether they're healthcare or retail or consumer facing. All those things are so very important. And that in between, that role that we play, where we're talking to members as well as elected officials, has been a really great sweet spot for us. And I think that we've been very valuable as a result of that space.
That's great. Jose or Ann?
Yes, I'll follow Nick with a couple of comments. We realized very early on that many of our members were very focused on clean energy issues. In fact, millennials and many of the startup businesses, particularly small businesses that were fighting to survive through COVID, were very environmentally conscious. And we felt that we could attract more members and retain more members by taking on full tilt this issue of renewable clean energy, water, and air quality. So we incorporated those principles into our public policy platform that we issue every year. We don't have a PAC, and we don't endorse candidates or raise money for them. We instead create a public policy platform that we ask our state legislators and county officials to endorse. And so we found a tremendous response to our renewable clean energy, water, and air quality public policy platform statement. And our board supported it, And we found that we gained more members by advertising the fact that we were very much focused on the environment, the future of the planet, clean energy, using solar and wind. And then as both gentlemen have pointed out, job creation. We saw from an economic development standpoint and sustainability standpoint that the more we aligned with clean energy, the more we were able to talk about future job creation in those particular fields. And Nevada enjoys a tremendous amount of sunshine and a tremendous amount of afternoon winds. So we quickly got on board with the types of jobs, the career credentials through the community college, as well as the University of Nevada, Reno, that could take people all the way from high school and beyond into well-paying positions in the clean energy environment.
Yeah, similarly, Susan, in Houston, our interest in transitioning our energy industry to a low carbon energy industry and clean energy industry is really rooted in out of necessity to remain competitive as a region. The Greater Houston Partnership, we actually represent a 12 county region, which is a very large area, 100-mile radius around Houston. So there are parts of our region that are very vulnerable to flooding, hurricanes. We have large areas that are agricultural and need diversity and water resources and energy infrastructure. And we've seen over just in the last 4 to 5 years, the Houston region getting impacted by major hurricanes and basically putting all the utilities going down simultaneously and putting the entire region's economy off track, for weeks and months at a time. So our interest is one part to make sure that we remain competitive, have the most resilient infrastructure available that is also diverse in terms of its fuel sources. And we also, want to make sure that we improve the air quality in the Houston region. We've actually lost out on major economic development projects because we are currently a non-attainment area. And going forward, some of our goals for Energy 2.0 are to attract, green hydrogen production, green ammonia, carbon capture, utilization, storage. All of these processes are very energy intensive. And we know that we need to be able to power these new facilities and new projects off of renewable energy and energy storage to make them feasible. But also we know that if we want to be competitive, we have to attract the best workforce available, the most technologically advanced workforce that has expertise in machine learning and AI and robotics. This is what all industries are going through, is trying to attract the digital workforce. And so in order to do that, we have to pay attention to what the millennial workforce and digital workforce care about. And it is about climate change, fighting climate change. It's about sustainability. And in Houston, it's not, the perceptions of Houston are that we're just oil and gas. And the reality is that we are a lot of things. And so we are, the biggest medical complex in the world with the Texas Medical Center. We are the home of NASA spaceflight operations at Johnson Space Center. But we are also the largest clean energy economy in Texas and the 7th largest in the nation. We have over 60,000 clean energy jobs and over 200 clean energy companies in Houston. So those things are very important to us. And we know that that's where the new jobs are going to come from in energy. So in order, from the standpoint of the Greater Houston Partnership, which we are essentially the Chamber of Commerce, to get on board with growing an Energy 2.0 economy, it was a very clear, easy decision for us. And just one more point is that our current mayor, Sylvester Turner, he is chairing the U.S. Conference of Mayors Sustainability Committee. And he, in his office, unveiled Houston's very first climate action plan. And it's a very detailed plan that has very aggressive climate reduction goals built into it. Everything from our use of renewable energy to transitioning our municipal fleet vehicles to electric, circular economy, recycling, building energy efficiency. And the way we view that at the partnership, we see these climate action plan goals as economic development opportunities to attract specific companies within Energy 2.0 to come help achieve these climate action goals. So for us, it's a central part of our strategy to grow an Energy 2.0 economy.
That's great. And I know Ann spoke specifically about her community's plans, sustainability plans. And um, Nick and Jose, do you also have similar type initiatives?
Yes, the cities that are within Tampa Bay certainly are leading in this space. Our chamber, however, has not put together one of those plans specifically, like Houston has led the way on that Jose mentioned. I suspect that's going to be something that happens in shorter order as our elected officials get truly comfortable and look to us for more guidance as to what we know to be true from a competitiveness standpoint. I think that provides them the adequate air cover. So I suspect that will be coming very shortly.
Right. And Jose, you're working on that both with elected officials and the chamber. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, so we've been working with the mayor's office on the Houston Climate Action Plan program, and on the specific goals. You know, for example, one of the goals is to try to grow, attract, or incubate 50 new Energy 2.0 companies over the next 5 years. So that specific goal was something that the partnership and the city came together on and said, we can do this together. We know we can hit that goal. And so we're in lockstep. Other goals in the climate action plan include, powering all of our municipal facilities off of renewables and increasing the use of renewable energy across the region, not just for emission standpoint, but also to reinforce and harden our infrastructure. So that's another goal that the partnership and the city came together on. So we have been working with our elected officials across the region, both at the city and the county level, on implementing these goals.
That's great.
I'm sorry, Ann.
That's okay. I was just going to say, to Jose's point, I think it's incredibly important that any chamber align itself with its local municipality and city officials. In our case, the city of Reno got the head start, and we fully participated on its advisory board, but then really took it from there and made it our own and said it's important for us to broadcast this plan to all of our members to make sure they read the entire plan. We paid to have it published and available to our members because we thought it was so important that the city of Reno had adopted clean energy standards well in advance of our state legislature, that we wanted our members, both in the city of Sparks and Reno, to take advantage of the material in that large plan.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo that, Ann, you're exactly right. You stole my sentiment. The leadership from the mayor's office is so very, very important, and it really starts with hiring good folks, right? So in the city of Tampa, as an example, bringing on a chief sustainability and resiliency officer, really important hire. And that person really has led the drive to creating the committee, and that you sort of mentioned that our president and CEO serves on, along with a number of our members that also serve on that committee, has really been so important with educating the entire community about how important this is. And some have been really surprised to see the business community actually involved with and leading portions of that process. And to your point, now it's kind of our responsibility to take that best practice in the city of Tampa, city of St. Petersburg, and then to export that to the other municipalities in and around Tampa Bay. And that's sort of our value add.
That's great.
Absolutely, Nick. I mean, yes. And I think you touched on this as our elected officials, mayors, and so forth begin to work on engagement like this and setting goals. It's one thing if they have a carbon emission and goals for their government buildings, but if you're talking about your entire community, we all know here that cannot happen without the business community as well. And as chambers, as the voice of business, it's certainly critical for you all to be part of that. So excellent. So the next couple questions will be perhaps put you somewhat more on the spot, but so throughout CICE's 10 years, we've been laser focused for our mission to really concentrate on the economic benefits of clean energy, to amplify the business voice, your voice in clean energy conversations. But we are seeing a clear shift, clear momentum towards using the words climate change is no longer taboo, because it's truly here and now. and happening. And more of us are seeing that as a threat to our economy and a threat to our way of life. So carbon pricing is now supported by some of the most really conservative business voices, the most conservative business organizations, even in the fossil fuel industry. Are you all having any of those conversations? And if not, do you see a path to working towards having these conversations?
Yeah, I'll add some background thoughts on that, Susan. You know, in Houston, it wasn't that long ago that you really could not say the words climate change, believe it or not. And it's amazing how quickly that's kind of you know, pivoted and moved in a whole different direction. You know, not only can you say climate change, you can talk in depth about the energy industry's role in helping and kind of exacerbating climate change and helping it proliferate. But now the conversations have evolved more into, okay, you know, what can we do to help mitigate the impacts of climate change? What can we actually try to do to reverse climate change? And how do we build new business models around it? And I think this is where carbon tax, cap and trade, and policies that look to add costs to emitting carbon come into play in Houston. And I think, you know, even amongst energy majors that serve on our board and executive board and advisory boards, they are asking elected officials to come up with creative solutions on pricing carbon, so that on the private sector side, new business models can emerge that take advantage of the carbon price, whatever it may be, whether it be through a carbon tax or a cap and trade program. One specific example is, as you probably saw a few weeks ago, you know, ExxonMobil had an op-ed where they talk about wanting to build out a carbon capture and storage facility in the Houston Ship Channel. And they believe this will cost upwards of $100 billion to build out this infrastructure, to tie together all the carbon emitting facilities in the ship channel, refineries, petrochem, LNG terminals, manufacturing facilities, and channel all of that CO2 through common infrastructure and inject it deep underground in the port of Houston. In order to execute on that, the federal incentives for carbon capture and storage need to dramatically change, and also we need to think about higher prices on carbon in order to develop sustainable business models. So all of these conversations, from we're not acknowledging climate change to yes we are, now let's create a whole new business model and give us higher prices on carbon, have taken place in the span of 5 years, which is incredible. But I think what's happening today is even traditional oil and gas companies, you know, they see their current business model as vulnerable, and they are looking to diversify their business models into new areas of energy. And a lot of, and you've read the headlines, you know, a lot of major companies have already come out proactively on announcing their specific plans for whether it be renewables, energy storage, hydrogen, CCUS, what have you. So it's a whole different ballgame today in Houston, and that's something that's very encouraging to me in my role, wanting to grow a clean energy economy in Houston.
If I can comment, Susan, on something Jose said, you know, 5 years ago, our vocabulary was very different, but we had Tesla arrive on the scene in 2014 and Panasonic, so the largest gigafactory in the world producing electric vehicles, arrived, and that really grabbed the attention of the entire Northern Nevada population. And it's interesting to watch that since 2014, when people barely knew what EV stood for, that we're now seeing local car dealers all joining forces to produce and sell electric vehicles from their companies, something I would have never imagined seeing in this brief a period. But to Jose's point, that vocabulary is now very commonplace. I imagine in many chambers where not only are chamber members demanding information about clean energy, but we're finding new members who are younger and more resilient in terms of the conversation about climate change. one only need watch the news about Germany and the floods. You know, there's something every day that reminds us things are changing in front of us every single day. And so I'm fascinated that it's no longer taboo or even, something out of the ordinary to talk about resiliency and climate change and clean energy and carbon reductions and carbon tax. Those are just regular conversations we have at this chamber every single day with our members and with our board and with city officials and then elected officials at the state level. Our governor has created grandiose support for a certain Senate bill that passed on clean energy, where the state's major utility is going to spend over $100 million to build electric vehicle charging stations throughout Nevada, particularly in rural Nevada, which everyone has to go through to get from Las Vegas to Reno or Reno to Las Vegas, which is a 500-mile distance, and also calls for more power lines, extended tax credits for large battery storage systems, and the creation of a task force to study the possibility of joining multi-state wholesale electric markets. And I think that's the kind of terminology 5 years ago I would have never been involved in. I would have been recycling my plastic water bottles, and that would be my contribution to a clean environment. And so my own learning curve and that of our members has been so profound over the last couple of years that I think there's no turning back at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you both, Ann and Jose. I think, pardon the pun, the canary in the coal mine is when the utility companies look to diversify some of the investments that they're making, trying to grow inorganically by purchasing the assets of green energy companies, by setting out certain aggressive targets to reduce fossil fuels by time certain increments. I think it's really important. The second piece, I think, and to your point about the legislature, is in Florida, road infrastructure is so very important. So much of that is paid for by the gas tax. And if we know electric vehicles, someone mentioned Tesla, are going to take over the traditional combustible gas engines, well, that means that revenue comes off the table. So we have to account for ways to continue to maintain our roads through innovative sources. And so we saw this past session a variety of ways to do that with innovative things like e-vehicle flat fee in order to pay for some of those infrastructure needs. And so those two things, I think, are the real telltale signs that we are truly in a different phase of the green economy.
Yes, we saw that in our legislative session as well, and there are still ongoing discussions about how to make it fair for those gas users and EV users. And I imagine that will take a disproportionate amount of time in our next legislative session. Our legislature only meets every other year, so we have a ways to go, but that gives us lots of time to come up with innovative ways to ensure that gas tax is in fact altered in a way where electric vehicle users are paying their fair share, because much like Florida, we're tourism dependent and those roads make a difference, and keeping the infrastructure prepared and contemporary will depend on paying those taxes. And if we have more electric vehicles on the road, we'll be dependent on those paying their fair share as well.
Yes, so we could probably do a separate session just on, the electrification of transportation and what that means for all of us. I want to move on. We've talked about all of the positives, and we see the light, so to speak. We get it, but as we probably all know, it doesn't mean that that everyone else does. So have you in your time of leading on this, have you experienced any backlash, any opposition to any policies or projects or what have you that you've led on or participated in? And if you have, what's a lesson learned, and what advice would you offer to other chamber directors who are just beginning on this issue?
So
go ahead, please.
I think it's a good sign when everyone wants to speak first, right? I wouldn't say we've experienced any pushback necessarily, but the one thing that we have heard is, as you know, Susan, businesses don't like to be surprised. right? Operating in a place of certainty is why they exist. That's how they thrive. And so any opportunity that we have to bring stakeholders from various impacted industries along early, I think has been really important to our success. And I would encourage anyone else, if your chamber is thinking about getting involved, have conversations very early with impacted industries and their trade associations to understand some of the implications to some of these changes, right? So for us, if we think about the healthcare space, last session, there was a bill passed that said that certain healthcare entities have to have backup sources of energy. Well, most of them chose natural gas as a backup source to generate in the event of hurricane, outage, anything like that. And so some of the changes that the cities were proposing were counter to that bill that passed last session. And again, had those stakeholders been involved in particular city ordinances, that could have been resolved pretty quickly. So I would just point to that, Susan, as making sure you bring the right folks to the table as early as possible to avoid any of the pitfalls and pushback.
I'll just comment based on what Nick said. Very early on, we brought various member stakeholders to the table, and we did have some initial pushback from the Petroleum Association, car dealer associations, but the point was they had a seat at the table and they raised their concerns and we listened. And ultimately, we've seen them all jump on the bandwagon. Once car manufacturers were announcing deals to produce more electric vehicles, we saw our local car dealers just soften their anti-clean energy positions just a little bit and say, you know, I want to learn and get educated and find out what we should be doing. And I think to Nick's point, bringing those stakeholders to the table so that you're not developing people who are opposed to the chamber's position, but really have a voice in concert with the chamber's position. It doesn't mean you're going to win everybody over, and it doesn't mean they're going to quickly sign on for everything we are supporting, but we haven't alienated them because we've listened, we've heard their concerns, and for the most part, we've engaged them all along the way and said everything is in transition. If, you know, tomorrow morning, you're not going to have all the cars off your lot and selling just EVs, for instance. This is a long process that will take time, and we want you to be part of it, and we want to hear what you have to say about jobs, electrification, gas tax, whatever your thoughts are. So I think my advice to any chamber dipping a toe or jumping off the high dive would be get your members together, get all the stakeholders to understand the importance, because to Susan's point and everyone on this panel, it's no longer a question of resisting climate change or getting into political debates about it. It's a question of how are we going to embrace what we see happening in our globe and everywhere around us, and how we can react to it, and how chambers can be a leading voice during that transition.
Yeah, and from the Houston perspective, Susan, I think, you know, we have seen, you know, aggressive resistance to efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change, to transition to a clean energy economy. However, you know, after every major event that occurs, you see fewer and fewer holdouts. And so, you know, I would say Hurricane Harvey was a major turning point in Houston, where we had over 50 inches of rain fall on the Houston area in a span of 3 days. And you had, you know, brand new refineries that were just, they did the ribbon cutting on a month earlier that were under 5 feet of water. And so when major things like that happen and have a direct impact to the bottom line, a negative impact to the bottom line, things change very quickly. And also what's happening now with, you know, the incumbent energy industry is they know that in order to transition their business models, in order to produce even fossil energy in a lower carbon ways, they need new advanced technologies. They need to be able to recruit the machine learning experts, the AI, the robotics, the digital analytics and data scientists. And what's happening on university campuses across the country is more universities are offering curriculum in these areas. They're in high demand, but there's a lot of different industry sectors showing up on university campuses recruiting the top graduates. And so when a student coming out of a machine learning program at at the University of Texas or Rice or University of Houston, when they're getting ready to graduate, they're getting offers from Google, from Facebook, from Apple, and also, Exxon and Chevron and Shell are also showing up. The reality is that 9 times out of 10, those graduates are going to work for Google or Apple or Facebook. And so the incumbent energy industry is finding it harder to compete for talent. And so that's also a big motivator. So we, as the Chamber of Commerce, we also operate what's called Upskill Houston, which is our workforce development program. We are offering energy industry partners opportunities to engage in upskilling, retraining, and also to help identify the skills and talent that they need for their future business. And so I would say more and more you're seeing the holdouts who have fought this effort aggressively for decades are starting to change their tune very quickly. And if they don't, then you saw what happened at Exxon Mobil's quarterly board meeting. You face a potential hostile takeover, and you have a big shakeup in your board, and it'll be done one way or another. And so I think being proactive has always paid dividends. And I think the vast majority of the major energy companies in Houston are being proactive and are fully on board with what we're trying to do in Energy 2.0. And eventually I feel that the rest will come to the table and be a collaborative partner.
That's amazing. If you've seen me look down a little bit, it's because I've been taking my notes madly as you all have been talking. So I'd like to close out with your thoughts on this. We're hearing there's so much great work being done in this space. We're hearing more and more about the intersection of climate action and racial justice. Efforts to create a cleaner, equitable future for all. Are any of you engaging in this, or do you see an opportunity for chambers to do so?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Jose, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this is a major priority for the Greater Houston Partnership. We actually are the most diverse city in North America. We're 1 in 4 Houstonians are foreign born. We're definitely the most diverse city in Texas. And so this is something that hits at the heart of what it is to be a Houstonian. Also, we suffer from major extreme weather events. And what the reality is that those who are impacted the most by hurricanes and floods and other extreme weather, extreme climate events are those with the least. And in Houston, it's specifically the low to moderate income communities, Black and brown communities, Black and brown families. And this is something that has risen to the top, including Mayor Sylvester Turner, whose climate action plan is specifically geared towards improving infrastructure and resiliency in low to moderate income communities. And so that's something that we really are focused on. We don't want this focus on Energy 2.0 and attracting Energy 2.0 companies just to benefit those with engineering degrees and PhDs. We really want to be able to create jobs across the entire across skill levels. So that is really something that's really important to Houston, is making sure that our efforts in leading the world in energy transition benefit everyone.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that that's a huge part of our mission as well. When we worked on the climate and sustainability plan with the city of Reno, food insecurity, transportation issues were all part of the plan, and how to make sure that underserved communities had every bit of access as the rest of the population did, in terms of clean energy jobs, education and information, transportation, access to affordable transportation and housing, access to green vegetables and good nourishing food. I think all of that is under the title of climate change. And so it's not confined to, let's just all drive electric vehicles or have solar rooftops. I think it's such an enormous topic. That's why you're seeing the world embrace this, unfortunately, due to a lot of tragedy, whether it's floods or hurricanes, volcanoes. we're seeing that the world is suddenly grasping with the fact we're a small planet and we want to sustain it and we want generations to come to live in a healthy environment. I know that one of the things we did in response to your question, Susan, is we offered to all of our members a free green business certification class.
Oh.
It was a class taught by experts in the community. It was 6 weeks, 1 hour at noon with free lunch, and it was just tremendously successful. And we're going to continue that because we found that so many businesses had different definitions of what green energy, climate sustainability, resilience, all the terminology that we're now getting accustomed to, what all that meant. So in a matter of a couple of weeks, they can each become green business certified and have a little sticker on their door, which in fact turns out to promote business, particularly among younger generations. They want to know that a business is attentive to the environment, is using every means and method to reduce energy consumption, reduce carbon emissions, in any manner or form within their business context to be certified in green business standards. And that didn't take a lot for us to put together. We just got speakers, we announced it, and people signed up, and they came to the chamber and took the class, and we presented them with their certifications. So we think we'll just keep that going as a way to educate and inform more businesses throughout the community, regardless of size, how important it is to think about the environment, to think about what they can do to contribute to a cleaner environment. Sometimes it's just planting a tree in front of their store and creating shade for those who might not have access to greenery. So, that class was, it was very easy to put together, very successful, and we'll continue to do that.
And I would just add, I think I agree with Jose and with Ann wholeheartedly. The connection is so very important, particularly as Ann mentioned, with frontline communities, Black and brown communities mostly, the lack of greenery, the more prevalence of brownfields, lack of weatherization. There's a lot of opportunities for chambers of commerce to lead here. In fact, we wrote a letter to the editor actually this morning on this topic, marrying the two of those ideas and getting the broader community to understand the connection, I think is a really important place for the chamber to be, and that important thought leadership ultimately can help move the needle with the broader community. The last thing I would just point to is I neglected to mention that the city of Tampa, city of St. Petersburg, both cities within Tampa Bay joined with Orlando and parts of Miami to be a part of the Florida Race to Zero, which is an interesting competitive campaign amongst the city's mayors to get Florida to a place of carbon neutrality. And I'd like to see that group look at this issue of frontline communities and the marrying of resilience and climate change to potentially be a lever as well. There seems to be a missing piece there, or an opportunity for the Race to Zero to also push that initiative and that narrative forward as well. So that's we're committed to making sure we do that as a chamber. We, as I'm sure Houston has, as well as Reno, committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives along with climate change and sustainability. So there seems to be a wonderful partnership in the making there.
This could be an opportunity for you to challenge your co-panelist. No, that's great. And I'm so glad that you brought up a couple of those great projects that you've been working on. And I have been reading a little bit about that certification. And when you said it was easy to put together, I'm sure every chamber director watching is like, the word easy and chamber programming sometimes doesn't go hand in hand.
I can send the agenda, and I'm
That's
sure
great.
there are lots of experts in each chamber's respective community that will be happy for no charge and a free lunch to come and talk about trees or organic gardens or carbon emissions or ways restaurants can reduce food waste. I mean, there are just so many topics, and it turned out to be very popular. And I don't think it was because of the free lunch. I think people really see, to everyone's point before, the economic development attributes of being a clean energy business. And I think the consumers of the future are going to demand that, whether it's in the clothing you wear or the homes you buy or the food you eat. we're all going to be on the same page.
That's great. So I'm going to try to somehow bring this great conversation all together. I'm going to try to weave it together. First of all, thank you so much, Nick, Ann, and Jose, for sharing with us your expertise, your experiences, and how you're leading in this space. And it sounds like your work has begun, but it's certainly not over. So from what we've heard today, show us both any chamber's mission statement, and we can show you there's a clear, distinct connection to supporting clean energy, and it can be via EV infrastructure, like we've talked about, or investment. It can be advising your members why it's good business to consider reducing its carbon footprint, to supporting a wind or solar project in your area. It's all about supporting business growth. We talked about it today: economic investment, job creation. It's all about that. So our largest members are demanding it, but our smaller businesses are craving to have a seat at that table too. We talked about entrepreneurship and innovation and the opportunity there. But and though it's much more than a conversation at this point, it's still a good place to begin if you have not yet done so already. One of the most essential functions of chambers, and we heard it today, it is to advocate for strong economic, business policy and legislation to help your communities thrive. Policy that engages, encourages, and welcomes investment and job creation, not hinder it. We're all working towards helping to build a stronger, more resilient economy and healthy businesses. It's very clear from today's conversation that clean energy is often a path to creating a stronger and sustainable economy. Sometimes it's the #1 opportunity. So I'd like to thank my chamber colleagues for taking part in this dialogue today. You inspire us all to make sure we not only have a seat at the table for these critical discussions, but to be seated at the head of the table, perhaps leading them. Thank you once again. Let's keep the dialogue going. There's too much at stake not to. If you're listening to this during the ACCE Summit, make sure to visit the Chambers for Innovation booth. Following the conference, if you're accessing this, simply go to chambersforinnovation.com. Thank you so much for being with us today.